All right, so you ready to take a deep dive into
Yeah.
A Year of the Elephant?
Absolutely. Sounds fascinating.
You sent over some seriously cool stuff, by the way.
Mm.
One piece that kind of goes chapter by chapter, and then another that's like the big picture, plot, characters, all those good things.
Yeah, should be interesting to see what we can pull out.
Exactly. We're going to try to like really distill it down. Like what's at the heart of this book? What makes it such an important piece of like contemporary Arabic lit?
Definitely. It's a pretty powerful story about a Moroccan woman, Salma. It's all about her journey, like finding herself and figuring stuff out, and all against this like backdrop of her country going through some crazy transformation too.
Oh, for sure. And that backdrop, A Year of the Elephant, that's not just a random title, right? It's like loaded with meaning.
Totally. It symbolizes like a time of just insane upheaval in Moroccan history. Kind of mirrors what Salma's going through personally too,
Oh.
after her husband dies.
Right. So when we first meet her, she's like reeling from this loss.
Yeah.
But it feels like there's something else going on too under the surface, like her grief's mixed up with something else. What do you think?
It's so interesting how the author, Leila Abouzeid, she she portrays Salma's grief kind of intertwined with this sense of like liberation almost. That yeah, she's sad, but there's also this feeling of relief, like she's finally free from this marriage that even though it was like stable and all, it was also kind of suffocating her.
Yeah, that's exactly what I picked up on too. This tension between wanting to be free and all the things holding her back, like her culture and stuff. It feels like that's a big, big theme, like running through the whole book.
Absolutely. A Year of the Elephant, it really dives deep into what it means to be a woman, in a traditional society, but one that's trying to modernize. Salma's like internal struggle, it reflects what's happening in Morocco too, Like think about it. She's dealing with this personal loss at the same time that her whole country's figuring out its identity after colonialism.
It makes you wonder how much our own lives are shaped by like the bigger picture stuff happening around us, right?
Yeah.
What really stood out to you about how Abu Zaid connects those things, like Selma's personal journey and what's happening in society?
Her writing style it's so effective. It's very introspective, reflective. It's like we're right there in Salma's head, feeling her confusion, her anger, those moments when things click. It's very intimate.
Okay, so speaking of intimate, let's get into those chapter summaries you sent over.
All right, let's do it.
They really give us this up close view of what Selma's going through emotionally.
Yeah, right. Like in those first few chapters, we see Salma coming back to her hometown. She's been away for years, but she just feels like totally out of place.
It's almost as if she's like a stranger in her own life.
Exactly. And then her family relationships are like a whole other layer of complexity. She adores her grandfather, but she's like almost indifferent to her mother. It's a very nuanced way of looking at family, I think.
And and then there's her husband, right? That source that goes through the chapters. It highlights this growing sense of betrayal, resentment on Salma's part.
Oh, yeah. And it's like subtle at first,
Mm.
right? Little hints, memories that start to kind of unravel that whole image of the like stable marriage.
Yeah, yeah, like she's finally seeing her life, seeing her marriage through like a new lens, maybe a lens she couldn't access before, when her husband was still alive.
Which I think brings us to what's most interesting about Selma, her resilience. Like even with all this grief, all this disillusionment, she finds ways to take control again.
Like when she starts spinning wool again and selling it. That felt like a big moment for her.
It totally was. And it's not just about the money, although that's important, obviously. It's more about her rediscovering this skill, this part of herself that she'd kind of forgotten about. It's about being independent in a very real way.
It's like this small thing, but it says so much, right?
Yeah.
What do you think? Like, how much does Salma's journey in these early chapters, how much would that resonate with someone listening right now? Have you ever had a time where you had to kind of rediscover yourself, maybe tap into like an old passion or something to get through a tough time?
I think it's something everyone goes through at some point, that need to find yourself again when life throws you a curveball. And Salma's story, it reminds us that those moments of rediscovery, they can be so powerful.
Yeah. And sometimes they come from the most unexpected places, like Salma getting a job at the French Cultural Center.
Yeah.
It's kind of ironic, right? Given like her mixed feelings about Western influence.
I think that detail shows how brilliant Abu is as a writer. There's always these layers of complexity, It's never simple.
Right, right. So we've got Salma finding her footing, starting to like blaze her own trail, but she's also looking for guidance, right? She
Mhm.
talks to the sheik, even goes to a fortune teller. What do you make of those interactions?
It's really interesting. She's like turning to both traditional and spiritual sources of wisdom, trying to make sense of everything. It shows how multifaceted her identity is. She's this modern woman, but also someone deeply rooted in her traditions.
And those traditions, those like societal expectations, they're constantly pushing and pulling at her, aren't they?
Exactly. And it all kind of comes to a head in chapter 4.
You mean when her friend Safia betrays her and she starts to see the cracks in that like social solidarity?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That betrayal, and then with all the political turmoil happening, it really shows how fragile trust is and how complex female friendships can be in a society that's changing so fast. And it reinforces that this is about more than just Salma's personal growth. It's about how she navigates this changing landscape in Morocco itself.
Yeah. That connection between her personal transformation and what's happening in society,
Yeah.
it feels so central to the book, doesn't it? Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it's through that we really understand the title, A Year of the Elephant. It's not just about destruction, it's about what comes after, what emerges from the ruins.
That's such a good point. It kind of sets us up perfectly to move on to chapter 5, where we see Salma facing even more challenges, but she's also like starting to embrace the possibility of a new beginning, ready to see where she goes next.
Oh, yeah. Let's dive in. Chapter 5, right off the bat, Salma's like hit with this wave of pessimism.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she's having a tough time like making ends meet, selling her wool but not getting much for it. It's kind of like a harsh wake-up call, after all that hope about finding her own way.
Yeah, it's interesting how Abouzeid really shows us the economic reality of Salma's situation, right? It's like another layer to her fight for independence.
Totally. And it kind of pushes her to go to the shrine looking for comfort. She talks to the sheikh, tells him she just wants to escape, like get out of there.
Wow. So even as she's trying to be independent, there's still that pull to just run away, find an easier solution.
I mean, yeah, it's a natural reaction, isn't it? When things are tough, you just want to escape.
Right.
But the sheikh, he kind of offers a different perspective. He reminds her, real change comes from within. Running away won't solve anything.
Yeah, he's right.
It's like a reminder that sometimes you got to face your problems head on, even when it's really hard.
That feels like a big theme in the book, right?
Yeah.
Like personal transformation, it's messy. You got to do the hard work, look inside yourself and all that.
Absolutely. And speaking of digging deep, this chapter, this is where we see how much Salma's marriage has fallen apart. She thinks back on how distant they became, and then there's this confrontation where she accuses her husband of cheating. Raw, really painful, but it's also like a crucial step in her becoming free.
It's like, even though it hurts so much, there's like a sense of relief in that confrontation.
Yeah.
Right? She's finally breaking free from pretending everything was okay,
Yeah.
acknowledging what she's known deep down for a while.
Yeah. It's a turning point for her. She's done with being the dutiful wife. She wants honesty, even if it means shattering everything she thought her life was.
And in all this emotional turmoil, she goes to a fortune teller with her friend, Rukia.
Yeah.
It's interesting. She's trying both traditional and spiritual ways to find answers.
Yeah.
It shows how open she is to different ways of seeing things.
It's like she's just looking for anything to hold on to in a world that's suddenly gone crazy. And the fortune teller, even though what she says is vague, it gives Salma a little bit of hope amidst all the betrayal and uncertainty.
It makes you think about how important hope is when everything's changing, right?
Excellent.
Even a tiny bit of hope can be enough to keep you going.
Oh, totally. And for Salma, that hope gets tested even more when her sister shows up, expects her to move back in with family, after the divorce. It's like what society expects. And it leads to this big clash, brings up all this resentment they have, and just drives them further apart.
It's like a reminder that the pressure to conform, it can even come from your family.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that pressure gets even worse when Salma starts looking for a job.
Oh, yeah.
She gets rejected left and right. People look down on her, treat her with prejudice, just because she's divorced.
It really shows you how few options women had, especially divorced women, back then.
It does, and that makes it even more amazing when she finally finds work at the French Cultural Center.
Right.
It's almost defiant, getting a job at a place that represents the colonizers. It's a reminder that personal journeys, they often collide with, like, big historical forces in ways you wouldn't expect.
We've been talking a lot about Salma's inner world, but Chapter 5 also shows us what's happening in Morocco as a whole, right? Like how Salma's community is dealing with independence, the changes in power, all the economic uncertainty. It really brings that historical context to life.
It does, and we see it all through Salma's eyes. Like, when she talks to the sheikh, you can hear this growing disillusionment with all the promises of independence.
It's like even when there's big societal change, individuals are experiencing it in different ways,
Yeah.
right? Like a mix of hope and disappointment.
Exactly. And as chapter 5 ends, Salma's starting to let go of the past, accepting that the future is uncertain, even finding some peace in all the chaos. It shows how strong she is, how she keeps going even when she doesn't know what's going to happen next.
I love that Abouzeid ends the chapter with Salma finding comfort in prayer.
Yeah.
It shows how important faith is to her.
It's such a powerful image, you know? It captures everything about her, being so rooted in her traditions, but also so independent, always looking for balance in a world that keeps changing.
So as we finish talking about chapter 5,
Hmm.
what's the biggest takeaway for you? What should our listener be thinking about as we move into the last part of the book?
I think the key thing is, this isn't just about Salma finding herself, it's about her finding her place in a world that's transforming itself.
Mhm.
Her journey is like a mini version of what's happening in Morocco during this Year of the Elephant.
That's a great way to put it. It sets us up perfectly to explore the last chapters and see how Salma ultimately handles all those personal and societal shifts, ready to dive into the conclusion of A Year of the Elephant.
Let's do it.
We've been on this journey with Salma through this like crazy year of the elephant, right? Seeing her deal with loss, all those societal expectations, trying to figure out who she is. As we go into these last chapters, what are you most curious about?
For me, it's how Abuzaid brings it all together, you know? Salma's growth, the political stuff changing, and that whole elephant metaphor.
Yeah, that elephant, it's been like this huge symbol throughout the book. What do you think it'll like represent in these last chapters?
We've talked about it representing destruction, but also rebirth. Maybe we'll see Salma kind of embrace both sides of that, like finding a way to make peace with what she's lost, but also be open to new beginnings.
That's really interesting thought. It kind of ties back to what we've been saying this whole time. Like personal transformation isn't always pretty. You got to face the good and the bad.
Right, exactly. And that's what makes Salma's story so relatable. It's not some like simple success story. It's about like the messiness of life, the ups and downs, all of it.
And through it all, Salma never gives up control. She's always making choices, even when society's trying to box her in. It reminds you that you always have some power over your own life, even when things are tough.
I'm also curious about Salma's relationships, how they change in these last chapters. Like, she's made some unexpected connections, like with the German guard Walter and his wife Fatna. Do you think those relationships will continue to challenge how she sees the world?
That whole Salma Walter thing is so interesting. It forces her to rethink her ideas about Western culture, shows her that people from different backgrounds can find common ground. Like you can connect with people in the most random ways.
Yeah, and then there's her friend Rukia. They're so different, but they've helped each other through so much. Will their friendship survive as Salma keeps doing her own thing?
That's a good question. It makes you think about how important female friendships are, especially when women face so many obstacles.
Absolutely. We see it throughout the book, women coming together, supporting each other. It's a powerful theme, this idea of solidarity, community.
Talking about community, I wonder about Salma's role in her own community, how that changes. At the beginning, she felt like an outsider, coming back to a place that didn't feel like home anymore. But as she's been rediscovering herself, she's also been connecting with people who want change, who want a better society.
Yeah, her going to those women's meetings, talking about politics and the future of Morocco, that was a big moment. It showed that she's ready to get involved in the bigger issues that affect her life.
It's like her own transformation is making her want to be part of a bigger transformation happening around her.
Exactly. And I think that connection between personal and societal change, that's one of the most important things to take away from A Year of the Elephant. It reminds us that our own lives are always linked to what's going on in the world, and that even small acts of courage, of resilience, they can be part of a much bigger movement.
That feels so relevant today. We're all dealing with our own stuff with so much uncertainty in the world. Salma's story reminds us that we're not alone in our struggles.
And that even when everything's chaotic, there's always a chance for growth, for transformation, for finding meaning and purpose.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into A Year of the Elephant, what's the one thing you want our listener to remember? What's the most important takeaway from Salma's story?
I hope they're inspired by how strong Salma is, how brave she is to face the truth, and how determined she is to create her own path, even when she doesn't know where it leads.
It's been amazing talking about this book with you. Any last thoughts for our listener?
If you're looking for a story that makes you think, makes you see the world differently, and really moves you, You gotta check out A Year of the Elephant. It's a book that stays with you.
I totally agree. It's been awesome sharing this deep dive with you. And to our listener, thanks for joining us on this adventure. We hope we've sparked your interest, made you want to explore Salma's story for yourself. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep believing in the power of stories to connect us, challenge us, and change us.